Once upon a time in the heart of medieval England, there lived a young orphaned stable boy named Edwin, and now this is a tale that's been told and retold around village hearths throughout the ages, each telling more fantastical than the last. For it was said that on nights when the full moon shone bright and clear above the rolling hills and dales, one might hear the sound of harps and lutes echoing across the moorlands, carried on the wind along with the soft murmur of voices like unto a choir, and that if one were pure of heart and followed the sound, they would find themselves beyond the reach of time and mortality, journeying through enchanted forests filled with dryads and other mythical creatures into the very heavens to meet the Moonlight Queen in her celestial court. It was old Thomasina, Edwin's beloved grandmother, who first told him these enchanting tales while she rocked him in his cradle during their long winter nights beneath the vast moonlit sky. For Thomasina knew the ways of old, and her bloodline could be traced back to the ancient druids of these lands. And so it was no surprise that one day when Edwin had grown to the age of 16 summers, he too heard the haunting strains of music carried on the night breeze. And so, driven by youthful curiosity and a longing for adventure, Edwin resolved to follow the sound to its source, trusting that his grandmother's tales would guide him safely on his way. Thus, after bidding farewell to his gran and the rest of the villagers, Edwin set out into the moonlit countryside alone and unafraid, for he knew not only did the spirits of the land hold no malice towards him, but many would aid him on his quest. Just as Thomasina had foretold an hour's walk from the village, just as the clock tower chimed midnight, Edwin found himself at the edge of a dark and ancient wood, and as he stepped foot within its shadowy bounds, he heard the rustle of leaves and the flapping of wings above. And there, perched upon a nearby branch, regarding him with wise amber eyes, was the most beautiful snowy owl he had ever seen. Then, as Edwin watched in wonder, the owl spread its great wings and let out a soft hoot, which seemed to echo with a strange familiarity in his mind. And taking flight, the owl glided just ahead of Edwin, allowing him to catch glimpses of its luminous white plumage as it disappeared between the trees. And thus it led him deeper and deeper into the forest, until suddenly before them stood a clearing bathed in moonlight, and in the center, shimmering on the grass, sat a single glowing silver feather. Now, remembering his grandmother's stories, Edwin knew this must be the sign he had been waiting for Thomasina had often spoken of the moon-callers, spirits of the air, who served as messengers to the Moonlight Queen, guiding travelers lost in darkness to hidden places of magic and wonder. And sure enough, as Edwin reached out to take the feather, it unfolded before his eyes, revealing a message written in swirling script. Edwin, son of Hymer, you have shown a pure heart and listened closely to the tales of old. Now follow this feather, for it holds the moonlight's gentle glow, and it will lead you onwards to the queen who waits above. With these words of encouragement, Edwin tucked the glowing feather into his tunic and continued his journey into the forest, for the owl had already taken flight once more and beckoned for him to follow. As he walked, the trees grew taller and older, their branches gnarled and twisted like the limbs of some slumbering giants. And yet overhead, the canopy was thin enough to allow the moon's soft beams to filter down through, illuminating the moss-covered stones and roots that lay scattered around. And as he ventured deeper into the woods, he heard the distant rush of water and soon came to a small stream babbling over pebbles in the clearing. Here the owl alighted upon a nearby stone and regarded him with a solemn gaze. Then, dipping its head towards the stream, it hooted softly once more, and Edwin understood that he must follow the flow of the water downstream, until it joined with others to form a lake, for there his path would become clear. So following the stream, Edwin soon came to a weathered stone bridge that crossed over a deep ravine. But pausing a moment, he looked up and saw that the trees had given way to reveal a magnificent view of the night sky. And standing beneath the open heavens, Edwin felt a sense of peace and wonder wash over him like a tidal wave. And in that moment, he realized that the tales his grandmother had told him were not just stories, but fragments of an ancient truth that had been whispered across the ages. For looking up, he saw the silvery feather tucked into his tunic shimmer with renewed brightness, guiding his steps towards the moonlit lake in the distance. So gathering his courage, Edwin stepped onto the moss-covered stones and began his journey across the bridge. Yet suddenly, just as he reached the midpoint, the ground trembled beneath his feet and a deep voice boomed out across the ravine. Then, from the shadows on the far bank, a pair of glowing red eyes emerged, followed by the hulking form of a troll who blocked their way. "Hold, traveler," the troll bellowed, "and explain why you intrude upon my domain." And then with a start, Edwin realized that the troll was not merely an obstacle in his path, but rather a test of character, for trolls are known to dwell in dark places and prey upon the fears of those who wander too close. Yet, though Edwin was but a simple stable lad, he had learned much from his grandmother, for she had taught him that fear is but a shadow cast by the unknown, and that courage is not the absence of fear but the triumph of light over dark. And so, taking a deep breath, Edwin stepped forward and met the troll's gaze directly with his own. "I mean you no harm," he said steadily, "for I am but a humble traveler, seeking only to reach the lake beyond your domain. If you will let me pass, I promise I shall not disturb your slumber." The troll regarded him for a long moment, weighing his words, and then surprisingly, a low rumble of laughter echoed from his throat. "Well spoken, little mortal," the troll boomed. "You have passed my test of tongue. And so I shall grant you safe passage to the lake, and even show you a shortcut through the whispering woods, where ancient spirits linger still, but only for those with pure intentions." With that, the troll gestured towards a narrow path hidden amongst the trees, barely wide enough for Edwin to fit through. But he thanked the troll and stepped inside, for the trees parted before him, revealing a short and secret passage that led directly to the lake. And as Edwin emerged from the trees, he found himself on the shores of a tranquil body of water, surrounded by weeping willows that dipped their branches into the depths. And from their rustling leaves, Edwin could have sworn he heard the faint whisper of voices greeting him. And as he approached the water's edge, he noticed something peculiar, for the surface of the lake seemed to ripple as though disturbed by a gentle breeze, even though the surrounding trees offered no shelter from the wind. And then suddenly, right before his eyes, the surface of the lake parted as if by an unseen hand, revealing a staircase of purest silver spiraling upwards into the sky. Then, without hesitation, Edwin stepped forward and began to climb. And as he ascended higher and higher, the silver stairs hummed with a celestial light that filled him with warmth and peace. And finally, when he reached the top, he found himself standing on a cloud that floated gently through the night sky. And as the cloud sailed upwards, Edwin saw that the silver stairs had vanished from sight, leaving him alone on his path to the moon. Now the closer Edwin journeyed towards the moon, the more wondrous and fantastical the clouds and skylands he encountered. At times he saw meadows filled with flowers that glowed with bioluminescence, and at others, rivers of starlight flowed like wine from crystal goblets suspended in the heavens. And all around him, mythical English creatures stirred in their slumberous lairs, such as the dryad who hung from a nearby oak, or the slumbering dragon coiled around an ancient abbey that had been forgotten by men. But Edwin stopped to help each of them on his way, for he freed the dryad from a thorny thicket, watered the dragon's den, and woke the abbey's forgotten monks to say their evening prayers. And in return, these mythical creatures aided Edwin on his quest, for the dryad sang enchantments to keep him safe from harm. The dragon lent him its fiery breath to light his way, and the monks provided him with food and drink to sustain his journey. At last, after what seemed like hours upon hours, the silver garden of the moon lay spread before him, and in its center sat the Moonlight Queen upon her celestial throne. And as Edwin approached, he heard the soft chime of bells and the murmur of voices like unto a choir, and he knew he had arrived at his destination. Then the queen turned and regarded him with eyes as bright and clear as the stars above, and she beckoned for him to come closer. "Edwin, son of Hymer," she said, "your deeds have brought you before my court, and now you may ask of me a single wish, for you have shown a pure heart and an unwavering determination to help those in need." And as Edwin stood before the queen, he thought of all the riches and treasures he might ask for, but instead, remembering the plight of his people, he wished for peace to reign across the kingdom, and for all strife and discord to be forgotten. The queen smiled, for she knew that true happiness lay not in material possessions, but in the bonds of love and friendship, and with a wave of her magic wand she granted Edwin's wish. Then, as the sky filled with fireworks and celestial music echoed through the heavens, Edwin awoke in his bed back in the village, none the wiser as to whether his adventure had been real or a figment of his imagination. But soon, word spread that the king and his counselors had come to a peaceful resolution, and that joy and prosperity returned to the land. And so, though few believed his tale, Edwin knew in his heart that his adventure was true, for he had seen the Moonlight Queen and felt the magic of the moon beneath his feet. And thus, the tale of Edwin and the moon is passed down through the ages, reminding us all that those who seek the moon with pure hearts shine brighter than stars.